Hi, and welcome to Women in Retail Talks. I'm Melissa Campanelli, co-founder of the Women in Retail Leadership Circle and the brand and content director for the Retail and Travel Group at NAPCO Media. And today I'm delighted to be speaking with Christina Rogers, who is the consumer global leader at EY, where she leads more than 50,000 employees in EY's consumer products, retail, and agribusiness branch. Today, Christina will discuss key findings from EY's Future Consumer Index, as well as the steps retailers need to take to stay ahead of the changing consumer. She'll also discuss her interesting and varied career, her leadership style, and more. So welcome, Christina.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you.
Great to have you here. I'm just going to jump right in.
Sure, absolutely.
So I talked a little bit just now about your varied career, which we talked a little bit about on the prep call. So I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit about your career trajectory and your role at EY.
Sure. Well, this is one I don't need notes for in any way, which is terrific. No, but seriously, I in my junior year at college, I did a year abroad in Belgium. And that was it. I knew I needed my career to be a passport to working abroad and just seeing how the world works and seeing what is going on in different parts of the world. And so for the most part, my career has been outside of North America in various places. I was based in Turkey for a number of years, working across the Middle East. I was based in the UK for 5 years, working across Europe. And in my current role as our global consumer leader, I, of course, work with our teams all around the world. And certainly before the pandemic hit, was very present with our teams in many markets. And to be honest, this has really been a passion of mine. And I've been fortunate that I've chosen work that has allowed me to use my work as a passport for learning new things, seeing new things, and incorporating that into the work that I do.
Great. Yeah, I think you had lived in more than 20 countries. Is that correct? That's amazing.
Yeah, and probably
Awesome.
more than that when I think about just, I lived in Johannesburg for a year back in the day when I first started my career. And yeah, so I've always sought out just that opportunity to really be based somewhere different and to explore the culturally, but the business community and how things get done. And of course, throughout that time, I started a family. So my kids have been in tow for a good part of that experience. But now as teens, firmly experiencing what it's like to be a teenager in the United States. And I myself am not American, I'm Canadian. So it's, except for my MBA that I did in the United States, it's our first experience living here.
Wow, that's awesome. So, and tell me a little bit about your role at EY.
So I've been in this role about 3.5 years. And the point is really to be thinking across those sectors that you mentioned. So retail, consumer products, and food and agribusiness, and helping our teams around the world work with clients and really think about what is it that EY needs to bring in those sectors to our clients. So thinking ahead, what are the trends? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges that are coming upon us in those sectors? And how do we configure the right advice and solutions to help our clients through that and to either get through something that is challenging or really reach for the opportunity that's out there. And so we have priority markets around the world. And so I work with our leadership in those markets thinking, do we have the right people? Do we have the right setup? Do we have the right knowledge in those markets to really help our global companies succeed? So that's one part of it. And then some of it is just the internal workings of managing the team, the global team across the world, and making sure that just we continue to reinvent ourselves. Everything is moving so fast in the CP and retail space that we need to just kind of run to keep up right now.
Sure, for sure. I also know that you're the architect of the Future Consumer Index at EY. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that and kind of the genesis of it, why you decided to launch it.
Well, I suppose like you and everyone else globally, last March 2020, when suddenly I think I had made my last work trip to a retail headquarter in Minneapolis. You can sort out who that might be. I came home and my kids were like, "Oh my goodness, our school's going to be closed," and I was like, "Oh, I need to catch up." And then a day later, everything was closed, and I thought, well, this is something we need to start understanding, right? We kind of saw it, of course. Other countries came before the United States, but it was hitting home. And so, from my experience, in my career, understanding the shift in consumer behavior was going to be incredibly important for our clients. What were we as consumers going to be experiencing? And what would that mean for our habits in terms of how we would shop, what we would be doing, where we would be going, if anywhere? Of course, we were fully locked down. So, myself and the team went through an exercise where we thought, well, where around the world do we want to collect these insights? And so we, came up with a collection of countries where we thought we just need to be understanding how consumers and people are experiencing this pandemic, and what does it mean on the dimensions that our retail and consumer products companies will care about, and then keep going back into the market and testing that. Because the purpose was really to say, okay, is this over in 3 months and we all go back to quote normal? Or are there behaviors and new routines established that our clients are going to have to contend with? And so it's been my, real focus to get that information into the hands of our clients with the Future Consumer Index, which is now, over the last couple of cycles in 20 countries around the world, and help them get a view as to what they need to contend with in such a short period of time, how some really new habits and behaviors have been cemented. And I think that our clients knew some of these things were on the horizon, but as many pundits and those of us in the business have experienced, a lot of things were accelerated.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'd love to maybe learn about some key findings, including those relating to the consumer behaviors, how they're shifting, and what the future of shopping may look like. I mean, for example, on the prep call, you spoke about how the role of the home has changed in post-pandemic America. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that and anything else you'd want to share.
I think the idea of the home hub is really fascinating, and one that all of the clients I work with need to take seriously. So as much as we talk about, well, the roaring 20s are here and everyone's just going to be out like spending and doing things and buying things, I think we also need to take a step back and say, okay, but what might they be spending on, and where will they be spending from? And so I would say certainly one trend that has gotten more traction and I think more entrenched as we've been doing this cycle of research is that the at-home living and seeing our home as our hub is really here to stay. A few statistics from the Future Consumer Index. I mean, 56% of people plan to continue to stay fit at home, using, Zoom fitness classes or any exercise equipment they might have purchased. When you ask people what they might spend on, 33% of people say they plan to upgrade appliance and furniture and, redecorate their homes where they're spending a lot of time. 30% of people hope to be able to just stay and work from home. And so I think there's a challenge here where, especially retailers, need to be thinking, well, how do I get to where the consumer is? Because the consumer is at home a lot, and yes, they will be going out for experiences and they will be going out to socialize perhaps, but it's less certain, I think, that they're going out to spend time in what was traditional retail. And so I think for retailers there's two things out of this. One, I think they need to think about what's the shift in spending. So acknowledge that maybe there's a shift. So people spending much more on big items around their homes. If they have backyards, it's garden things too. It's landscaping. It's just making their home the place that they want to be. But then it's also, am I configured to meet that consumer where they are? Commerce has to fit into their home routines. And so, is my, are my operations set up for that? If someone's doing a Zoom class from home, we're being trained now. I want to buy that piece of fitness equipment right then and there when that class is over. I want to click through and buy it. Are we set up to do that? And that's not just for fitness equipment, but that is, invading so much of our lives right now.
For sure. Great. Those are some great insights. The report also points out how e-commerce grew enormously during the pandemic. So, I'd love to get your perspective there. Do you think that'll continue? And are there any downsides to the growth of e-commerce for consumers?
Yeah, and I bet you that you can even reflect on your own experience, and as a consumer, that was your own personal experience. It was certainly mine, and I think in North America, especially, I think we were laggards in terms of grocery shopping online. It was just something we had not, really done in the same way as we had done in Europe. Even when I lived in the UK in the mid 2000s, Ocado, which is a delivery, was huge. I personally didn't use it because at the time I was just me, but it was big. But when I moved here, it really wasn't. And so certainly that is a trend that obviously when stores were closed, picked up immediately for all age groups. And I think that is here to stay. I mean, even things you hear consumers say, well, I still want to pick out my fresh produce and so on. They may say that, but that's not what the statistics bear out, right? Ordering fresh food over, e-commerce was almost non-existent a couple of years ago. Now we see that people are just fine with it. And throughout the work that we've been doing, as I said, we've been wanting to see, what is a trend, right? What is sticking and what's not. So if I look back a year ago, when I think about, people visiting stores, 65% of people said, I don't plan to get into a store. Well, that's no surprise. A, they were closed, and B, people were scared. But even in our most recent round of research, which is almost a year later, 57% of people say, yeah, I just don't plan to, I will be visiting physical stores much less frequently. I don't need to. There's so many things I can buy online, and I've been now conditioned to do that. And so I think, that's a real challenge because it happens so quickly, right? It's a challenge to supply chain and operations for retailers. But clearly one of the things we're seeing, because a lot of this happens so quickly, is the experience that people are having is not necessarily where it needs to be. So, we are registering a lot of dissatisfaction around, the cost of delivery and the difficult return process, and, the fact that availability is sometimes limited. And so, there's a lot of work to be done, I think, on experience. And whoever can get that, done first and done right and done quickly will have a massive leg up with consumers.
Sure. Makes sense. I mean, in your opinion, are these changes that we're talking about, do you feel like they're fundamental consumer shifts, or are they changes that may last, 1 or 2 years post-pandemic? Are we in a new normal, or the next normal, as people are saying?
I think around the way we're shopping, or that it's, fundamentally different from 15 months ago, that is certainly here to stay. Maybe my kids had been doing things online that I wasn't doing, but are through the pandemic, we have all, even, my neighbor across the street who's in her 70s, she's all online. She's all about online. And I asked her if she plans to, be in store, and she said maybe, but just to do something social. So, I think some of this is absolutely cemented. We were forced into it and we like it, right? There's a lot to be said about the convenience we have now. But interestingly, I mean, one thing that I've been tracking, and I had some hypotheses about this even before the pandemic, as there were more questions and consumer issues around sustainability and waste and plastic and all of those things. I was just, wondering, when are we going to hit a wall in terms of consumerism? And I've been looking at some of the data, that we've collected and other data through the pandemic. And when you ask about fundamental change, I wonder, have we reached the zenith of consumerism? So, if you think about it, through the pandemic, we, at the beginning especially, we learned to live with, whatever there was, right? People were trying to get all sorts of cleaning products, stocking up on food, and there were stock outs. People ended up with private label. Oh, that works just fine, and maybe they've never gone back. We've also learned to live with less, right? So, we've many people in our population have become very price sensitive, have had economic hardship through the pandemic, and have realized that they can live with less, and that maybe private label or store brands are just fine. And we even see that in our index where 58% of people are saying they will be focusing more on value for money in the future, because the way they've shopped or what they've bought or how they've spent through the last year has opened their eyes to maybe their waste or what they don't need to be spending on. So I've noticed that consumers have just become much more price sensitive. They're just really having a look at what they're spending on. And I think what it tells us is, if you're in the experience business, or you're in the service business, or maybe the indulgence business, you might be better positioned as we come out of this.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. That's certainly going to be here to say. I agree. So what are some steps that retailers can take, to stay ahead of the changing consumer? I mean, if this stuff is happening going forward, is there anything that they can do now?
Well, I think, it's interesting. We've put a lot of thought into this, clearly. And when we think about like the future of retail, there's 3 I's that we are really talking to our clients about. So that's invisibility, indispensability, and intimacy. And by invisibility, I mean time-saving convenience, right? Just set something up for me that is quick, that, if it's something I'm buying that I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about, or, I just don't want to put a lot of effort into that, know that, and make sure that you are providing me something with convenience that saves my time. By indispensability, problem solving for the consumer. So I think we've, over time, we've become conditioned to want to have our problems solved, not just buy something. And our retailers really thinking about that. Where do they fit in terms of solving an issue for me? And a great example of this for me was, I was on a judging panel for an innovation challenge. And one of the business cases was for an app with a video service that, detected ear infections for children. This is a big pain point for parents.
Sure.
So they don't want to take time off work. The kid's crying. It's like a big disaster if you've had kids. And this app just, you put the little scope into the ear, it takes a picture, it sends something to a diagnostic team, it diagnoses whether there's an infection or not. And if there is, the doctor writes a prescription to the pharmacy sends you the prescription, and you get on with your day. Now that to me is a great, example of a retailer getting involved in an ecosystem that is solving a problem, right? That pharmacist, that retailer, CVS, Walgreens, whatever it is embedded into that ecosystem and solving my problem. I think we're going to need to see much more of that. And then there's intimacy. Am I, as a consumer, having a satisfying and rewarding experience? And it takes a lot of data and consumer understanding to really get that. But I think that's important, because so much of what we want to spend our time now on is having a good experience. It's really something we're seeing in our data. People are willing to spend more on experience. 43% of consumers told us that. And they're willing to share their data for a personalized experience. I think that's really key. And that's actually something new that we're seeing. And so I think those retailers that really understand their master data, how to use it, how to use it strategically, will really have a leg up in creating that circle of the 3 I's for each of us.
Wow, that's super interesting. Great advice for our listeners. But I'd love to jump in a little bit more with you as a leader. We spoke about your background earlier, and you clearly had such an amazing career. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your leadership style. So how would you describe yourself as a leader?
That might be the first time I've been asked this question. I think, just reflecting on my style, I definitely like to create a flat team. I know I can provide guidance. I've had a long career and structure to the work we do and setting the goals. But the team is there to do the work and get creative and break some rules at EY. And I think it is all about the team and, providing stretch and letting people shine and prove what they can do. I worked at a firm early in my career that was very meritocratic. And if you were, 24 years old and could do it and were smarter than, your boss, they put you out there. And I've always believed in it because I think people really need a chance. And so, that's really just trusting the people you have. And listening to them and giving them the opportunity to do things. And quite frankly, I mean, one of the things that I've valued in my career is, having a couple of people be, quote, the one, right? The one who really lifted me up in my career, just gave me that opportunity. And, I will remember always who they are. And I try to be that one, for all the people on my team. And I've had 3 direct reports poached from me in the last by other parts of EY in the last 3 months. So I think that's a good sign. It's painful, but I hope that means I'm doing something right.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. I love that. The one want to be the one
Yeah,
for someone.
I'm lucky. I have 2 ones. There's 2 people I can really look back in my career and just say, those people got it. They understood me at that moment and they trusted me and they were the one.
Perfect. And then you talked about your team and how important they are. So how do you keep them motivated right now during these confusing times? That's a big topic for a lot of our listeners, is sort of how to keep people, working at their best when they know it's just so hard to know what the next steps are going to be.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we're just sick of Zooming and teaming and not teaming, but Teams.
Right.
We're just sick of screens. So I certainly, a small detail, when it's our global team that works with me, we turn our videos off. We know who we are. We walk around the house. We walk outside for our meetings. We don't need to see each other anymore. We just want to, move around. But I think we try to have some fun, build in some laughter and be human. I mean, I try to share the simple personal frustrations I have or the good stories. And, just trying to imagine at the end of the day, whatever our, roles are in EY, we are all struggling right now with, or less so maybe right now, but through the last year with, homeschooling and working from home and schooling from home and everything being canceled and kids driving you crazy. And, if you have kids. And so I think it's just, sharing the humanity about, what we're all experiencing and just connecting that way and knowing that, we're all having good and bad days. And I think that means just encouraging flexibility throughout this. Some people, because of their situation, how they live or how many kids they have, if they do, or their partner or whatever. I mean, we just have needed to have flexibility and, remember that. But it also means, trying to respect people's boundaries. So I think it's been a tough balance, but, I think having some laughs is definitely really important.
For sure. I totally agree. So as we round out the interview, we only have a couple minutes left. I would love to know what you're most looking forward to as we head into the next normal.
Oh, let me see. Less screen time. For sure.
For sure.
For sure. For both me and my kids, because I never know if they're actually doing schoolwork or other stuff, other stuff that I've told them not to do. But really, do you know what? It's just, certainly in my work life, it's the social time. So, one thing that was always fantastic about travel was seeing people on my team. So we have a distributed team anyway, which was valuable, when we first went into working remotely and from home, because, my direct team was already working like that, but we still connected and we saw each other in person, quite often. We need to get together. I just need to,
Yep.
have a glass of wine with my coworkers, have dinner or do something fun, because I think we've all become slightly, just inhuman
Yeah.
in terms of the way we've been working. And so I will really be looking forward to that. People have had some really, great moments throughout this, whether it's, someone had a baby or what have you, and we haven't been able to celebrate any of that in person. And it's, people say, oh, well, we've learned to live online and in video. Well, I personally haven't. Maybe I'm too old for that, but I need to get out and see some of my coworkers who I really, adore and just want to spend time with.
I totally get that for sure. Well, it was so great chatting with you, Christina, and getting to know you a little bit more. And sounds like you have so many great things to look forward to, and you have a great team and some great data. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I also want to thank all of you for listening. And for more information on this podcast, you can check out our podcast channel page at womeninretail.com/podcast for some show notes. And just a reminder, Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks so much. And until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.